Hello, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Budget and Finance Committee for December. And I'd like to start with introductions. Ms. Ann.
Kate Dyer, CFO. Marilyn Bonza, Budget.
Company Controller.
Cleo Hill, Fire Marshal.
Bill Evans, Assembly.
Elby Gray Johnson.
Jim Steelson.
Peter Ruskin, Internal Audit.
Brian Robbins, Municipal Assessor.
Brett Schlosstein, Assessment.
Shirley Nelson, Budget Advisory Chair.
And how about two gentlemen in the audience?
Oh, I'm Matt Bungay. I come from East High School. I'm Luke Orrit. I come from East High School too.
Well, welcome to the meeting. Okay, as usual, we're going to start with the MOA financial status from the Chief Fiscal Officer.
Madam Chairman, the members of OMB are here to talk to you about fiscal results so far this year. The Controller is here to talk to you quickly about the audit, which you already know is done and will be presented to you soon. The Treasurer was going to be here, and he may still show up and provide you with an overview of the revenues. And I'm not sure what Brian has to say, but I'm sure it's important. We can start, if you'd like, with the OMB Director.
Thank you.
Acting OMB Director. Yes. Sorry, thank you.
So on that note, on June 11th, incoming Mayor Berkowitz announced that Lance Wilbur will become the director of OMB July 1. He is currently the public transit director, so just so you know.
I'll hand this out.
Oh, thank you. And so Kate, thank you. So Kate is handing out So what we're doing right now is we're still going to be presenting on the June 23rd meeting budget to actuals through May 31st. And so what Kate is handing out is one of the attachments to the AIM that goes to the Assembly, and it shows the progress of expenditures by department through May 31st. It's chunked in two parts, labor and non-labor. And again, this is just one part of the information that you'll be getting. So I'll just note the overages. So you'll see on the labor side, the bars indicate actual activity, and the line across is the percent through year. So the percent of payroll postings through the year, which are 39%. 0.5% through the year. CFO is over that at 48%, but that's due to activity that's going to be moved to the project. There was some activity that was posted to the CFO's department that we need to move. Once that activity is moved, and rightfully so, then the CFO will be, I think, at like 32% spent for labor.
Would you, Marilyn, please, if you will, explain to us what you mean by activity being moved, because I'm not clear on that. Maybe other people are, but I'm not.
The actual costs that add up to the 48%, the amount spent. Part of that wasn't for the CFO's functions.
Okay.
It was actually for the SAP project function.
Gotcha.
And so the costs associated with that, we will move from the CFO's actuals to where they belong, and so that would reduce the CFO's actuals. So the spend really isn't that high.
Right, I understand. And so where are they going?
Madam Chair, we budgeted all the SAP personnel and controller, and I should have put one in CFO. So we're just going to move that cost down to controller.
Controller. Thank you. That clarifies it. Thank you very much.
Still on the labor side, looks like library is slightly over on labor due to they've had more successful retention this year. But if you look over on the non-labor side, they're not at budget, and they're aware that they have better retention this year, and so they're managing their retention with their anticipated retirements this year and their non-labor, and they do expect to come on budget by the end of the year. So they're managing to that. So that's the labor activity. Non-labor activity, significant bits. Oh, so the non-labor activity has an additional part to the graph, which is The darker bars are actuals. The lighter bars, or the lighter half of the bar, represent encumbrances. So those are purchase orders that haven't been paid out yet, but a lot of them represent full year activity. So I'll just note that where the dark bars go over the line that goes across, which is the percent through the fiscal year where we're at, which is 41%. So the mayor, his actuals exceed the percent through the year, primarily because the majority of his current budget, non-labor budget, is his community grants, and he's paid the majority of his community grants. And then, yes.
Can I stop you from, I have a question, okay? Is the contribution to the museum, is that part of the community grants? Is that budgeted in the mayor's office in the community grants? It's like the almost $5 million to the museum.
No.
That's, what department is that budgeted in for distribution?
I don't believe that's in general government. I don't believe that's in general government. I'll look into that.
Because I know that they get almost $5 million from the municipality of Anchorage.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. And so, but I was curious as to where,
Okay.
okay.
And then next,
I'm
excuse me.
sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I
Sorry.
didn't get your eye, you were looking up. I'm concerned about the mayor's budget. Does this mean that he's got 87%, 88% almost of the yearly authorization for non-labor spent? What's the new mayor going to get to do?
Correct, yeah, 87% of the non-labor, which, like I said, the majority of the mayor's non-labor budget is the community grants.
Anyway, never mind. That's a political question, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Thank you, Marilyn.
The last department is that where budgets, actuals exceed the budget, or percent through the year, is real estate, and we're still working with them to determine why, but I believe it's because we're working on that answer, and we'll have it presented on the AIM. It's typically because, it's most likely because they have leases, so the majority of their non-labor budget is leases, and so they most likely paid prepaid expenditures that for the year, but I'll have that confirmed on the AIM. So that's it for the expenditures. The next item that is handed out is the 2016 preliminary budget schedule. Right now, we're working on developing the continuation budget, which, I guess I'll start with this is preliminary. We have it out so codified deadlines are identified. We have to get the budget out 90 days before the end of the year. 120-day report goes out 120 days before the year, and so we have to work backward with that. Right now, we're working on the continuation budget, and then once the new administration comes in, they'll probably make changes to the schedule. So that's where we're at with this.
Well, I'd like to just say I really appreciate seeing this schedule because we haven't seen one of these in quite some time. So thank you very much. The Assembly hasn't, the administration may have, but I like the fact that the Assembly, we're also seeing the schedule. And it'll be distributed to all of us, right, once it's finalized?
I can, yes.
I really would appreciate
Okay.
that.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next.
Mr. Moore, would you like to present the handout information for the copies?
I didn't actually bring copies of the handout. On Tuesday night at your assembly meeting, there will be the standard revenue status report that we provide. So you'll have that, I guess, in your packet as of tomorrow. What I was going to do is just provide some verbal highlights of what's in that report and kind of let you know where revenues stand. For the period, this was covering through June 9th, so this is as current as we can get. We're projecting for the year $2.4 million positive variance for all the 100 fund departments. So that's good news, it's positive. Of that $2.4 million, About half of it is property tax related, and amongst the property tax, about half of it's positive variance in real property, and about half of it's positive variance in personal property. Personal property is really oil and gas property, which kind of has its own timing. So we still need to know about all the regular business personal property. That's to be determined later in the year. But anyway, so half of the overall variance is from property tax. The other major components that help with that positive variance are construction right-of-way fees. That's due to probably an earlier start to the construction season due to the good weather. Auto tax is up strong. It's up 5%. It's been up more 1 to 3% in the last few years. So it's hard to say exactly what it could be. Maybe a greater population of cars, but I think more likely it's newer cars. They pay a higher registration. So that's up above what we had budgeted. Also, there's some additional reimbursement from the state for some public works work that was done, and also for street lighting reimbursement that was increased. And so those are kind of the main elements. There aren't that many, just a handful that actually explain that $2.4 million variance. There's other revenues that we have very carefully watching that have an upward trend to them, but we haven't yet projected surplus. It's just a little too early. So tobacco tax so far is ahead of the game. Traffic fines is actually quite ahead of the game, but we're still waiting to make sure that plays out, but that's looking good. Ambulance fees ahead of the game, and Fund 181, which again is construction related, earlier start to the season. The two areas that is really definitely too early to tell, room tax and rental vehicle tax. All we have is information filed for the first quarter, and that's a very odd quarter. So once we learn about the second quarter, which will be in late July, early August, we'll have our first real read on that. The biggest quarter of all is the third quarter. So anyway, we will have a better read on that in about another 6 weeks, but right now it's just way too early to say. But overall, if you look at the departments, I know Marilyn talked about the expenses and the different departments. Almost every department, there's just a few, are above the revenue budget that they had, so that's good. There's a few that I think like police departments, maybe $250,000 under their budget right now, but that's not building in the trend on traffic citations. So they could clearly make budget if things keep going the way they're going. And then the other departments are actually smaller than that. So overall, the variances are getting smaller and smaller, which means the accuracy done by the departments and Treasury, the whole collective effort, it's just getting better and better. So we really like to avoid the negative surprise. Positive news is always good, but we also don't, I mean, for OMB's purposes, they ask us probably twice a year to keep refreshing, what's our current view and what's our outlook on these revenues. And so we're constantly trying to keep it within where we think the most likely target is achieved. We don't want to overshoot. We don't want to be under either. So it's been a good process, and I think we're right on track. This is our first report of the year. We'll keep doing it every month for the next 6 or 7 months, and but it's off to a good start.
Thank you.
So, yep.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Banza, Ms. Goddard, and again, some more presentation, and if you don't want to stay for the rest of the fund, then back to the chair.
Did you have anything to say, Mr. Bates, about the audit?
I can. We're going to meet tomorrow.
Sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. I'll just do a brief. We're meeting tomorrow with the audit committee to go over the report. So basically, the audit's done. We signed the opinion June 10th. It was a clean opinion. Team worked very hard, did a great job. There were 2 comments that came up that I'll just briefly talk about. One is the investment pool reconciliation. They found that we didn't reconcile them timely. Nothing has changed. It's a yearly process because of the systems. We're going to work on trying to get it quarterly. It wasn't material, it didn't affect the numbers. It was just an exercise that was kind of a pain at the end. It took a while to get it because it wasn't done quarterly. So accounting controller, along with Ross's group, public finance, will work on figuring out how to get this more timely so it's a quicker performance at the end of the year. The other one, a little bigger issue, was with the port. We had to restate. It came out of the whole MURAD thing last year, mid-May, when we were almost ready to get the report out. We had held off on having to write a separate note on the port because we didn't know what the amount would be. Well, it turns out, at the beginning of May, we found out that an insurance claim had been filed, which means that we had some idea of the amount. So the auditor said, okay, now that you have an idea, you got to go in and write a note. So we did a quick cleanup. We wrote a bunch off. This is working with Jim Hinkle, the director. He was on his way out, so he was in and out at the time. It was a long process as well. And we missed some. We didn't do a deep enough dive. So this year, with the new director out there, we got together, did a deeper dive, and realized it was about $6.3 million in CWIP costs that should have been moved. And that was enough to trigger the restatement. Again, not enough to change the opinion. The opinions were clean on both the single audit and the CAFR. And that's it. Michelle Drew will be here tomorrow, in case anyone's interested. She's the audit partner. That's it.
Thank you very
And
much.
the detailed statements are coming. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I was going to mention the detailed statement.
We're trying to get them printed today.
Right, and I just want to say, thank you, Ms. Guard, for bringing them back, because we haven't had them for a long time. And for those of you who don't know what the detailed statements are, they're a wonderful complement to the financial statements, because they're really, really easy to read and easy to find things. So I'm really excited about it. Yeah, truly.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you
We're going to
very
get them
much.
to you today for sure by the meeting, but we're trying to
I
get them out
really
today.
appreciate that, and I apologize for looking over you. I just am not used to you getting on the report. But anyway,
Okay.
thank you very
Sure.
much. Any questions before the meeting? No? Okay. Great, thanks again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, report from the Budget Advisory Commission, Sharon Russell.
Hi, we are recessing for the summer. I just taken the 1 month off, but because so much is going on. So for the month of June, before we recess, I tasked the Budget Advisory Commission to meet with department heads and do interviews with just a few basic questions to possibly be instrumental in the transition team, to see what are some challenges, where are we at, and so on and so forth, so we can kind of educate ourselves where it's standing now, leading into with the new transition team, with the new administration and the changes like that. So I think most of the Budget Advisory Commissioners have had one, if not two, interviews with different department heads, and so on and so forth. So it's, we have not formalized or put anything together yet, but hopefully we'll have some good information just to help smooth, on what the department heads are saying and seeing, and what the challenges are, what the good news is, and so on and so forth. So that's our biggest project right now. I think one thing that came out at our last meeting too is we really want to pay attention to the tax cap. That was something we wanted to just always have updates in future meetings and stuff, just to know the status, where are we at, and what is happening with the tax cap, basically. And I'm saying it in my layman terms, but it is something that we, as a commission, said we would like to pay attention to, and so on. So that's about it for this, and we'll take July off, and we'll be meeting in August, possibly the second Wednesday in the month. I'll have it formally announced, just because I'm going to be in Maine that first Wednesday of the month, but I'll set that up ahead of time.
Any questions? I have a question, and it may be difficult to answer right now, but what's the BAC's thought on the tax cap and collecting enough money to pay for services for a community that's no longer 200,000, but over 310,000?
So what are you asking?
Well, I don't ever advocate taxing to the cap, but I find, and I have found over the last several years, that there's been quite a bit of money left that we could have collected to pay for services. So my question is, what's the BAC's position on that?
Well, I don't think that we really have a position yet. We're still trying to research and make sure that we understand what is happening with the tax cap.
Right.
And yes, if you can have that extra, we could have spent money versus how we set it up. So I don't have an opinion on it, and we don't. We just know that we want to learn more about it and watch how it is being utilized, because it has been used differently in the past. And an example was ML&P being moved out during past administration, and that affected, so it's
You mean
all...
NISA, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
but it also played in part of with the tax cap as well.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
we just want to keep an eye on that, but learn more about it, and so we're not saying no or yes, we just want to educate ourselves and know so that we can maybe advise, you know.
Right, and I really appreciate your comments, and honestly, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot at all, because I really want to know how the BAC feels about the question that I just asked, and I'll probably find out more by attending your meetings. So
Yes,
thank you.
exactly, and we want the input, and we want to see it from everyone, because we know there's going to be a big transition happening now with the new administration, and it's a concern, you know, on how, or I mean, I'm using
I know
the
what
wrong
you mean.
word, but
Yeah, I know
yeah,
what
I'm
you
saying it's something that we want to learn more about and keep an eye on.
Yeah,
and
it's a new
and so-
administration, with new administrations, always, there are changes, as there should be. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Peterson, who has just joined us, for the record. Mr. Steele, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. I want to emphasize that because everybody wants to tax below the cap. And as Ms. Gray Jackson was saying, that over time, you're digging yourself into a hole. You're no longer collecting enough to do what the citizens want, even the same amount.
Correct.
Over time. So it'd be kind of nice to have that audit, if you will, or that information, so that we can at least know what that is. I think the mayor would like that too.
Yeah, you know, we're not advocating, because I think no one really likes to pay a lot of taxes and stuff. We're not saying that the taxes are the solution. You know, I think we like to look at things, the spending side as well as the revenues, so is there a balance in there? And I think, you know, one of the things that came out in the property tax exemption, that tax consequences are falling into property tax owners, and that's a huge burden. And it's not that we're not saying we don't want to provide services at all. We've had that conversation with the nonprofits and everything, you know. And I have to say, when we presented it, and then I see the TV channel news that night went to Beans Cafe off what we were trying to say about nonprofits, and that's not. You know, we've been adamant and clear from the very beginning that we're just saying it needs to be looked at. We are not advocating anything. It's just something that we need to educate and study, because it has exploded. There are a lot of nonprofits, and I'm getting a little sidetracked, but the
That's
point
okay.
being
No, that's okay.
is that, you know, the media portrayed it like, well, Beans Cafe, and that was not our mission statement at all.
It's a part of the,
Yeah, and I think that's true of anything. We are just saying, we don't have an opinion. Once I've said all along, we're handing tools to decision makers, that hopefully we can be in an advisory role, that we can do homework and just say, you know, maybe we could be looking at this, because it is a huge burden on property tax owners to subsidize all of
residential
the...
property tax numbers.
In my, you know, and this is personal, it went up 25%. My valuation just this year, and my property, I got it in, went up substantially. So, you know, and we're running out of land, as always, you know, what you hear, but I don't mind having high valuation, but I don't want to sell. And I have to be concerned about being able to pay my taxes. So I'm looking at it from a private citizen perspective too. Can I keep affording the property taxes, you know, so to stay in my home.
Well, I just want to say, and I'm sure I can speak for the rest of the committee, that we really appreciate the work of the Budget Advisory Commission. And in terms of the nonprofit and the media, what I think threw them off was the fact that there was a resolution on the table from the BAC and a draft one from the Assembly. You know, so when you look at those two documents, I mean, if I was the media, I would certainly say, oh, wow, look at this. You know, and you know how the media spins stuff. Anyway, but please know that the subject matter isn't closed, and we're going to continue the discussion as soon as we're finished with the fire sprinkler discussion. And the nonprofits know that, but we're going to have them at the table.
Sure.
So we can hear what they have to say about it, along with the BAC's recommendation in your report. So again, thank you.
I find that very important, and I think what's nonprofits too, I've been reading more and more on it, that it isn't so much because they're how they can handle their financing and stuff. People want to look more at what impact you're making too, and I think that helps them. And so we want to be looking at it well-rounded too and stuff. So,
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Any questions before we move on? Okay, great. Now the highlight of our meeting today. At the last Budget Advisory Commission meeting, well, actually, at our last Budget Finance Committee meeting, Mr. Tamagi said that he was going to put together some questions to ask both property appraisal and the fire marshal regarding the property tax exemption for fire sprinklers, and I think everybody has a copy of the questions. And I'm really happy to report that Mr. Robbins has some response to some of the questions, and so does Ms. Hill. So who wants to go first?
Madam Chair, we have a response to questions 1, 2, and 5.
Okay.
And I have a general, sort of an overview, bit of information. To review the total value that is currently exempted under the fire suppression system as of 2015, this is an updated number, was $39,052,000. There were 776 parcels exempt. 352 of those
Can I
parcels.
ask you to go a little bit slower, because
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
taking notes. Thank you.
Yes, total of 776 parcels, and of that 776 parcels, 352 are condominiums. The remaining 424 are commercial buildings. And that equates, if you use the 14.98 mill rate, that would equate to approximately $585,000 in taxes shifted to other taxpayers as a result of this exemption.
Excuse me, residential condos or commercial condos?
Those are residential condos. So we have, and I'll get it.
There are a few commercial in there, but mostly residential.
And it's interesting, I'll skip down to this now that we're on that subject. Well, I'll take this in order, actually, I'm sorry.
That would be great. Thank you.
So question number 1 was, how long does it go on? And the question was, is it currently 50 years? The exemption, once a property is exempted, there's no end date. In other words, the exemption stays with the property until we're notified that the property is either torn down, the improvement is torn down, or if we get notification that the sprinkler system or the fire suppression system is no longer functional, then we would remove the exemption. But as long as the suppression system is functional, then that property would continue to receive the exemption.
Okay. Any questions so far?
Question 2, in the event of a sale to another owner, does it continue and for how long? And the answer to that is simple. The sale of the property doesn't affect the exemption. The new owner doesn't have to reapply for the exemption. The exemption stays with the property.
I do have a question on the, is the Northern Lights Inn still getting an exemption for sprinklers?
No. There's one that fell apart.
And we did not have a response to number 3. Do you want to?
Before you continue, Brian, because I'm trying hard to keep up, okay? So, number 2, so if the property is sold, the exemption stays, is what you said.
That's correct.
Period.
Yes.
Okay. So what if the property is sold and they don't realize, the buyer doesn't realize that there's an exemption?
It's still there.
It's still there,
Yeah.
so it's not, so it's just there.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it shows
I
up.
get
It shows up on the website
Right.
as well as in our CAMA systems.
Okay. Thank you.
Does it show on the tax bill?
Sure.
I believe it does. Yeah. I'm not, Dan's not here.
Dan would.
But if I can follow up, it shows up on the camera system?
Yes.
Would you do me a favor? Could you give me an address of one of them? Because I like to just take a look and see what it looks like.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, please continue.
I think Number 3 was more of a comment to the assembly. And then I think the number 4, I don't know if the fire department had any comment on 3 or 4.
Not on 3,
Through the chair.
no. I just wanted 4.
Okay.
And then did you go over number 5 already?
I will go over number 5.
Oh, okay, so do you want to do number 4 first?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Since 2010, we've had 10 fire fatalities, and we've had quite a few more injuries, about 119 injuries, but all our fire fatalities and all our injuries have occurred in non-sprinkler buildings, not sprinkler buildings. Also, just for a point of reference, all of those injuries and all of those fatalities occurred in residential structures, not commercial structures. Interestingly enough, the commercial structure area is where the code is more likely to require sprinkler systems. So, as has been mentioned in the past, the building code and the fire code are continually trying to keep up with new construction and safety methods, and as more and more buildings are required to be sprinklered, we're getting less and less injuries. There hasn't been a fire fatality or a fire injury in a sprinklered commercial building probably in 30 years.
Mr. Steele?
It would seem to me that it would be on the property owner's to-do list to put sprinklers in. I mean, just to protect his assets, even on condos.
I couldn't agree more in residential. We have tried over the years to get residential occupancy sprinklered. The International Residential Code, which the city adopts, actually requires them to be sprinklered, but during the code adoption process, that portion of the code gets amended out. So as of this date, we don't have a requirement to sprinkler residents, which again is the top 100% of our injuries and fire fatalities. So it's been my experience over the years that the state law has not kept up with technology. I don't know when the last time the state has looked at that particular state statute, but the building code and the fire code do indeed probably take care of 75 or 80% of the buildings that we currently have sprinklered for commercial would actually be required by code to be sprinklered now.
Any questions?
No, just good information. I had not a clue on that.
Mr. Peterson, did you have a comment?
I was just thinking about all the wildfires we're having right now, and obviously a sprinkler system is set up for the inside of the building.
It is.
So if we had a wildfire, the building would burn from the outside in, and hopefully the people would have time to get out. But the sprinkler system would be rather ineffective.
It would be ineffective. However, typically people who have sprinkler systems, because of their education with their own system, realize how easy it is to put a lawn sprinkler on top of your roof to provide the same protection on the exterior of your building as you do on the interior of your building.
As long as you have electricity
Yes.
to operate the pump.
Anything else, Ms. Hunt? Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Number 5 asked, what percentage of the current eligible properties participate in the exemption? And our CAMA system allows us to note whether there's a sprinkler system in commercial buildings, but it doesn't allow us to note whether there's a sprinkler system in residential buildings. So these percentages are based on the percent of commercial buildings eligible. And we kind of extrapolated into the residential. But the percent of eligible buildings that are participating is 38%. But it's interesting that that 38% represents about 50% of the eligible value exempted. So that implies that more of the larger, more valuable buildings are participating in the exemption than the smaller, less valuable buildings. Currently, residential properties make up only 4% of the total exempted value. So even though there are 352 condo units out of the 776 total exempted properties, it only makes up 4% of the total value exempted. B, under question 5, was what would be the maximum dollar subsidy if 100% of those eligible participated? And the answer to that is about $1.2 million. And the answer to C, which is what would be the maximum dollar subsidy if 50% of those eligible participated, is we don't know. Because of the reason I mentioned earlier, the number of exempted properties doesn't equate exactly to the value exempted, so it would just be a guess. You could use a rule of thumb of 50% of the total value. So hopefully that helps. That's the end of our answers to the questions.
Okay, well, any questions from anybody?
I guess my question would be if you have any recommendations for that we can pass on to state legislators with regards to the fire code exemptions. So on and so forth.
I would highly encourage them to reevaluate how their statute is written. It makes absolute sense to me to use that option as an incentive for buildings that are not required to be sprinklered, rather than the buildings that are already required to be sprinklered. And it would also, I would also suggest that we encourage the state legislature to find a way to more highly encourage residential occupancies to be sprinklered. Now, when these gentlemen talk about their residential condominium units, from the building code standpoint, for both building safety and fire, we look at those as commercial properties. We don't look at those as residential properties. For us, residential properties would be single-family duplex or 16 units or less, because 16 is the cutoff for a sprinkler system. And if we could encourage the state legislature to provide some incentive for the occupancies that are not required to be sprinklered, and especially residential, I think that would benefit both property homeowners and Anchorage as a whole, because if we can do anything to reduce our fire loss and buy smaller fire trucks, which are much less expensive, that would be terrific.
We say, excuse me, and we say 2%, about 2% of value is what the cost might be in that? Was that what we had?
Well, I believe that's what the tax cost, or the tax exemption is now, 2% for the cost.
Through the chair. I think that was the rule of thumb, and we did some research on that, and it was 2 to 3% of the value of the building when we looked at it in Marshall Swift. So the rule of thumb back when they passed the legislation was about 2%. It looks like maybe a little more than that now.
So let me follow up. So are you saying that the exemption is more than 2%? Because I thought it was set at 2%.
No, the exemption is 2%, but the rule of thumb cost for installing a sprinkler system is about 2 to 3%.
Oh, the cost?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha, not the exemption.
Yeah, and it ranges from slightly below 2% up to
Of the value,
close to
2 to
3%.
3% of the value of the property?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is that 2% on buildings that are newly constructed, they're doing it when they're building new, or is that 2% on buildings that are already constructed and they're adding them in later? Because I would think that would be more expensive.
I'll let Brad answer that.
Chair, it's both. It's just 2% of the value of the protected portion of the building. So if a building is only half sprinklered, they're only going to get the exemption on that half.
And I'll add that we did these calculations using the Marshall Swift cost estimator, so you could probably get better more detailed information from someone who specializes in that industry, but using Marshall and Swift, this was information we got.
And if I can follow up, I just ran some quick numbers. So on a home that's $280,000, that's valued at $280,000, the sprinkler would only cost $5,600. That's not bad at all for safety's sake, in my opinion. Not that I can necessarily afford it, but, still, safety, so. Any other questions? Ms. Hill?
If I may, through the chair. Usually when it comes to sprinkler costs, it's based on square footage, not on valuation of the structure. So in acreage, you can figure probably about $6 a square foot, all the way up to $8 a square foot for existing construction, which, as you mentioned, is more expensive.
Yeah, it goes
So
up to
that will
12,000.
probably, which is much more accurate.
That's for existing, for rehab, or is that for new construction?
It'll vary between $5 and $6 a square foot for new and $7 and $8 for existing.
Okay, thanks for that information. Any other questions or comments? So, Ms. Nelson, so would you present to your commission the responses to the questions? That would be really, really great.
Sure.
Really great. And so I guess my next question to the committee is, do we want to, do we have enough information? Do we need to take this conversation any further? At this point?
I think we need to talk about it a little bit more in terms of, to get a feel for what we want to do with regards to going forward. I know I was going to talk to my legislator about this, and maybe encourage some research on her part and some action from the state level. But it would be nice for us to talk about it and see what we draw from it and what kind of action we want to take.
Right, and I guess my question is, because I think that you're referring to the suggestions that Ms. Hill made in terms of the legislature.
In terms of changing the code.
Right, asking them to reevaluate how the statute is written.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm referring to is the recommendation from the Budget Advisory Commission that we look at the exemption, the actual exemption, to see if, there are any changes we need to make. That's the question that I have right now to the Budget Finance Committee members.
Yes, I would like to do that. One I'm certainly interested in is that it goes on forever, and I'm not sure that that's, it's not justified to do that.
Okay.
It's justified for them to put it in, but at some point they're getting a break that other people don't.
Okay. And do you have any comments, Mr. Adams?
No, the only thing I think that might be helpful as far as looking at this issue is if we had a presentation for maybe the commercial builders as to see. I don't know how this exemption came about. Obviously, it seems inconsistent in retrospect to have a requirement that you have a sprinkler and then a tax break basically for having it. But it's very possible that they did go hand in hand. At one point, it was decided to make the requirement, but also to assist the builders and assist in the costs, so that it would be shared instead of borne by the actual builders. And it would just be, I think, good to see what the real world effect is if we eliminated this exemption, at least with respect to the buildings that are required to have it, if that would have any dire impact on development or commercial building. Not that we couldn't do it anyway, but it'd be good to have that knowledge in advance.
So are you suggesting that maybe at our next meeting, we ask Amanda to set up, to make contact with the builders and have somebody
Yeah, I
come
don't
and
know
give
if
us
it's
a
BOMA or
presentation?
somebody that would be able to talk to
Okay,
the impact of
that would be great. for
how
the-
important this is to
For
them.
the next meeting, that would be great. So Amanda, could you take care of that, please? Thank you. Mr. Steele?
It would also be nice to know what the insurance benefit is of sprinklers in terms of, because, it's a safety issue for the insurer to have their building that secures their loan
Okay, so I appreciate the feedback from the committee members, and if anybody else has any comments you want to make, please.
I just had one question, Madam Chair. Brian, when you, at the very beginning, the total value, 39 million, what was that figure and what was that for? 39?
That's 39,052,000 in exempt value, which would equates to about $585,000
value.
in taxes.
How much in taxes?
About 585,000.
Okay, in taxes, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. And I'm going to follow up on Mr. Steele's comment in terms of looking at the one at a time. And I think it really is a good idea. And I'm just throwing this out because maybe once somebody who has exemption and they recoup what they've spent, then maybe a good idea that they no longer have the exemption. But that's something that we'll continue to discuss. And maybe when we have somebody from the building community come and talk to us at the next meeting, that's one of the things we can discuss. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, and I just wonder how practical and how difficult administratively that would be from the assessor's standpoint to know when the value has been maximized and the exemption ends.
Right.
Through the chair, of course, we did those payback scenarios, and they were between 50 and 100 years payback. It would have to be a set amount of time, say 50 years, something like that. Even then, with our current system, it might be rather difficult to administer. We'd have to do an audit every year of all of the sprinkler exemptions, and then remove the ones that were expiring in that year. It could be done, but it would require an additional step every year in the valuation process.
And I wonder, on these, maybe we need information on these sprinkler systems too. I would imagine they don't last 50 years, or that there may be requirements that you put in a sprinkler system, and 20 years later you're upgrading that, so you're incurring other costs. So.
If I may, through the chair, sprinkler systems actually will last 100 years.
Oh, wow.
They do need to be upgraded. Every now and then you have to flush out the pipes. They need a physical, just like humans do. And they need a little bit of nip and tuck every now and then. But once you have a legitimate sprinkler system in, they last a very long time. Very long time.
Realistically, how often does code change in terms of volume, those types of things, some of the external connections that the fire code requires, or some of those types of things?
Well, luckily for the sprinkler companies and the building owners, and for us, if you install a sprinkler system and it meets code at the time of construction, you are grandfathered in. You don't have to upgrade that sprinkler system until maybe you change occupancies, add on to the building, or there's been some catastrophic failure, like you turned your heat off and the sprinkler system froze. But you're always grandfathered in. You don't have to upgrade just because the code has found the new latest bit of technology. We try to be reasonable.
Thank you. Sometimes it's any other comments on this issue? So we have a plan for next month's meeting. We're going to continue the discussion and have builders come say a few words on the subject matter. Okay, audience participation. Would you like to say something or make some comments? You sure? Okay. Well, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for being here.